Haunted house at the end of the street. Step 1. Moving into the new house. The moving truck groaned to a stop at the end of Hollow Pine Street, just as the late afternoon sun dipped beneath the horizon. An eerie quiet settled over the cul-de-sac, broken only by the low hum of the engine and the rustling leaves stirred by a cold, whispering breeze. The house loomed at the very end, old, gray, and forgotten, as if it had been waiting. Emily Dawson, 17 and already tired of the move, pressed her face to the car window and frowned. Is that it?" she asked. Her mother, Laura, looked up from her phone, distracted. "Yeah, honey, that's the one. Isn't it cute? It just needs a little love." Emily said nothing. Cute wasn't the word she would use. The house stood like a monument to silence and shadows. Its paint had long faded to a lifeless shade of beige, windows dusty and dark. A crooked iron gate stood open, hinges squeaking even in the stillness. Above the porch, a single bulb flickered weakly, as if trying to warn them away. Her father, Alan Dawson, cheerful as ever, climbed out of the moving truck and stretched. "Home sweet home," he declared. Emily rolled her eyes. Great. A haunted farmhouse at the edge of nowhere. Just what every teenage girl wants in her senior year. They had moved from Chicago, a city Emily had loved. Busy streets, noisy neighbors, coffee shops, friends. Now, here they were in Greystone Hollow, a town so small it didn't even show up properly on Google Maps. According to local legend, as Emily would later learn, it was the kind of place people moved to, but rarely moved out of. "Come on, Em," her mother called. "We need your help unloading." The air outside was colder than it should have been for late September. Emily stepped out of the car, immediately clutching her hoodie tighter around her body. The house loomed larger the closer she got. The cracked steps moaned under her feet. Somewhere inside, the floor creaked, even though no one had gone in yet. "Did you hear that?" she asked, turning to her dad. "Hear what?" Alan looked from a box of dishes. "Never mind." The front door, tall and strangely ornate, resisted for a moment before giving way with a groan. The smell that greeted them was a mixture of dust, old wood, and something faintly metallic. The hallway was lined with faded wallpaper and portraits of people long forgotten, their eyes dull with time. "Okay, not creepy at all," Emily muttered. Alan looked around with forced optimism. The inspector said everything's structurally sound. Just needs a little cosmetic work. "Like exorcism?" Emily replied under her breath. "The first night." By the time they had moved in the essential furniture and eaten a rushed takeout dinner, the house had become even quieter. Emily's room was upstairs, at the very end of a narrow hallway lined with peeling paint and warped floorboards. Her room was surprisingly large, with a slanted ceiling and an old wardrobe that looked like it had grown there. She sat on her mattress, scrolling through her phone, but of course, no signal. No Wi-Fi yet either. Just silence, broken occasionally by strange popping sounds from the walls. Then came the knock. It was faint, barely there, but enough to make her look up. She crossed to her door and opened it. Nothing. The hallway was empty, the dim light from the stairwell casting long shadows. Maybe the house is just settling, she thought. She closed the door. A few minutes later, the knock came again. This time, she didn't open it. "Not funny, Dad," she called out. Silence. Emily lay back down, pulling the covers over her. The knocking didn't return that night, but she didn't sleep well. Morning questions. The next morning, over a breakfast of burnt toast and cold eggs, Emma looked at her dad. "Were you walking around upstairs last night?" "Nope," he said. "We were exhausted, out cold by 10. You didn't knock on my door?" "No." Emily hesitated. "I heard knocking, twice." Alan and Laura exchanged glances. "It's probably just the house settling," Laura said gently. "It's old. Takes time to get used to." "Right," Emily said, but she wasn't convinced. Later that day, as her parents busied themselves unpacking downstairs, Emily wandered through the upper floor. She opened each door, one by one. Most of the rooms were empty, bare wooden floors, dusty curtains, but the last door on the left was different. It was locked. She twisted the handle again, still locked. That night, curiosity got the better of her. She tiptoed out of her room, flashlight in hand, and crept to the locked door. She leaned close, listening. Nothing. Then she thought she heard a voice, soft like a whisper beneath a whisper. It came from inside the room. She backed away slowly, heart pounding. The neighbor. On the third day, a knock came at the front door, firm, steady. Alan opened it to reveal an older woman, probably in her late 60s, with silver hair and sharp eyes. "Hello," she said. "I'm Mrs. Langford. I live next door, or as close as neighbors get out here." "Nice to meet you," Alan said, shaking her hand. "Come on in." She stepped over the threshold and looked around, her expression unreadable. "You're brave to move in here," she said after a moment. Laura laughed. "Brave? Why's that?" Mrs. Langford glanced at Emily. "This house has a reputation." Emily leaned in. "What kind of reputation?" Mrs. Langford hesitated. "Strange things, lights turning on and off, doors locking themselves, people hearing voices, that kind of thing. No one's lived here for more than a few months in the last 30 years. Alan scoffed. "Well, we're not superstitious." The woman nodded but didn't smile. Before leaving, she touched Emily's shoulder. "Don't go near the basement," she whispered. "And if you hear someone calling your name at night, don't answer." The locked door opens. That evening, as the wind howled through the trees outside, Emily heard the door again. The locked one. This time, it creaked open. She stepped into the hallway, barefoot, holding her phone's flashlight in front of her. The once locked door stood ajar. Inside was a small room, almost a nursery. Faded wallpaper of stars and moons clung to the walls. A broken crib sat in the corner. Dust floated in the air like ash. On the floor was a child's doll, one glass eye missing. Emily picked it up. The room suddenly grew colder. She turned to leave, and the door slammed shut behind her. She screamed, pounded on the door. "Mom! Dad!" No answer. The room darkened. The doll in her hand grew hot, burning. Then a voice right behind her. "Emily?" She turned. No one was there. The door creaked open. Emily fled, not stopping until she was back in her room, heart racing, chest heaving. The Dawsons had moved into the house at the end of the street, but it had been waiting for them. And now it was awake. The days that followed Emily's terrifying night in the nursery passed in uneasy silence. She didn't speak of the voice, not to her parents, not to anyone, but it never left her. That whisper of her name, spoken not with love, but with hunger. She avoided the room, or tried to. But the house didn't want to be ignored. Doors creaked open by themselves. Lights flickered without explanation. She began to wake up with bruises she didn't remember getting. The smell of old iron and damp rot followed her like a shadow. One evening, as a storm rolled in over the hills and rain lashed against the windows, Emily sat on the floor of her bedroom, flipping through an old box of papers she found in the attic. Most of it was useless. Brittle receipts, yellowed newspaper clippings, letters from people long dead. But one envelope caught her eye. It had no name, no stamp, just a date. October 31st, 1984. She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a photograph, black and white, faded. A family of 4 stood in front of the same house, smiling stiffly. A man, a woman, a teenage boy, and a little girl with long hair holding a doll. The same doll from the nursery. On the back, someone had written, "Before the accident." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She flipped through more papers, finding fragments of the past. Newspaper clippings spoke of tragedy, a fire, a missing child, a family torn apart. One headline stopped her cold. Local girl presumed dead in basement fire, body never recovered. Her eyes scanned the article. Rebecca Morrow, age 6, was last seen the night of October 31st, 1984. Authorities believe the child may have accidentally started a fire in the home's basement. Her parents perished in the blaze. The only survivor was her older brother, Caleb Morrow, then 17, who was found unconscious outside the house. Emily sat back, stunned. Caleb. That name. Suddenly, she remembered. During her first week at school, she'd met a quiet young man. Reclusive. Odd. He'd helped her find her way around campus, but never spoken unless spoken to. He'd said his name was Caleb. No way. Could it be the same person? She needed answers. The next day, Emily skipped class and walked across town, her coat drawn tightly around her as wind carried dry leaves through the streets. She followed vague directions she'd overheard at school, eventually arriving at a dilapidated house near the woods, smaller than hers but no less eerie. She knocked. No answer. She turned to leave when the door creaked open. Caleb stood there, older than she remembered, pale, hollow-eyed, as if he hadn't slept in years. "What do you want?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. "I found something," Emily said. About your family, the fire, your sister. He stared at her. A long silence stretched between them. Come in, he said finally. The inside of the house was dark, walls lined with old books and strange symbols drawn in chalk. He led her to a small kitchen table and gestured for her to sit. She's still in that house, he said without prompting. Emily froze. Your sister? He nodded. Rebecca, the fire didn't kill her. Not really. Something took her. Something inside the basement. He leaned forward. I tried to warn them, everyone who moved in after us, but no one listens. The house doesn't let them. Emily took out the photograph and placed it on the table. Caleb's eyes softened as he stared at it. She used to sing in her sleep, he murmured. But after the night she disappeared, I started hearing her voice from the basement. She cried for help, but it wasn't really her. He looked up at Emily, haunted. That thing wears her face. It wants you to come down. Once you do, you never leave. The basement door. Emily returned home shaken. That night, the atmosphere in the house had shifted. The lights no longer flickered. They pulsed. The air felt charged like the moment before a lightning strike. She tried to tell her parents. Laura laughed it off. Alan frowned but said it was just old pipes, faulty wiring, maybe stress. But later she heard them whispering in the kitchen. She's not well, Laura. Maybe the move was too much for her. She's seeing things, maybe hearing them too. Emily closed her door. At 3:17 a.m. she woke with a start. Her door was wide open. So was the basement door. Step 3. The struggle to survive. The stairs creaked with every step as Emily descended into the darkness, flashlight trembling in her hand. The air was colder here, sharp and metallic like blood on frozen steel. Cobwebs brushed against her face. The walls were wet. At the bottom of the stairs, the beam of light landed on something that shouldn't have been there. Tiny, barefoot footprints burned into the concrete. Rebecca. Emily, a child's voice called sweetly. She turned sharply. Nothing. Then again, from the far corner. Emily, help me. I'm scared. The voice was wrong. Too perfect. It rang like a recording, not a plea. Emily's flashlight flickered and died. Darkness swallowed her whole. She backed toward the stairs, hands reaching, but the steps were gone. The basement had changed, twisted, lengthened, stretching into impossible corridors that had no right to exist. She ran blindly, heart pounding. The voice followed her. Don't leave me, Emily. Be my sister now. She stumbled into a room lit by a single flickering bulb. In the center stood a crib, the same crib from the nursery, and inside it, a burned, shriveled thing curled like a spider. It turned slowly, revealing a face half melted, half childlike. Rebecca. No, Emily whispered. The thing smiled. Its mouth cracked open wider than any mouth should. You opened the door, it hissed. Chains burst from the walls, wrapping around her wrists and ankles. She screamed, struggled, but the darkness was alive now, and it wanted her. Just before the thing lunged, a bright light exploded through the room. Get away from her, Caleb's voice boomed. He held an old lantern, pulsing with strange symbols. The creature recoiled, shrieking. The chains loosened. Caleb grabbed Emily and pulled her up the stairs, stairs that had returned, just as the walls began to collapse inward, groaning with fury. They barely made it out before the basement door slammed shut behind them. Reckoning. Alan and Laura found them moments later, wild-eyed and covered in soot. Caleb explained everything, or as much as he could, that the house had been a doorway, that something ancient lived beneath it, feeding on grief, on loneliness, on children. I thought sealing the basement would keep it in, he said, shaking. But it was never the door, it was the invitation. Emily turned to her parents, tears in her eyes. You have to believe me now. They did. The Dawsons moved out that same night. They didn't take anything but their clothes and each other. They didn't sell the house. They left it. Abandoned it. The town called it a tragedy. Another family broken by bad luck. But Emily knew the truth. Epilogue. The house waits. Years later, the house still stands at the end of the street. Windows dark, door slightly ajar, waiting. And at night, if the wind is just right, you can hear the faintest voice drifting from the basement. Emily, won't you come play again?